do any of you have those sort of private dining facilities or use places for that example?
I represent a law firm, Fish Waterhouse, and similar to Jason, a lot of our partners used to take clients out, as you say, obviously not when there was confidential matters being discussed, but now we've got a very strong focus on trying to entertain clients and potential clients in-house. So we're in the process this summer of actually changing a number of our meeting rooms so that they're geared up so they can be a meeting room and the adjacent room can be ready for fine dining, either for a lunchtime event or an evening event. And the focus there, because again for law firms the recession tends to be a little bit later, so we're still sort of having a tough year this year, we're not coming out of it just yet. The focus now is to spend the money on the rooms, get them right and keep the clients on site for as long as possible rather than spending the money outside, and that's a huge turnaround from where we were in 2008.
Do you think that will save you, as well as obviously the convenience factor, and that will save money a lot in the long term?
Yeah, it's envisaged that it's going to save a significant amount of money, and a lot of it is through the sort of the admin process as well of just, as you say, booking it. You're not taking the client out in a cab, you're not having to then claim that back, you're not having to sort of go through the justification of why you were out or that type of thing. So we've looked at the whole picture as a way of justifying the project.
And I guess as well, you can also, you have a certain level, you can guarantee you get a certain level in-house, whereas you might not necessarily get that.
It's interesting, we did some work for an accounting firm recently. They moved into sort of prestigious offices and clearly had the same issue as yourself. They wanted to make sure people stayed in. And it was interesting, a benchmarking exercise. It cost 4 times as much to go out to the expensive restaurants, which is nice on occasions, but in most of the cases now, the quality of the chefs and the culinary skills are significantly better than some of the restaurants, actually. And because it's there, it's part of the organisation you're working for, it attracts people in, clients, partners, and the whole thing. So I think, the contract catering industry, if you like to call it that, has responded really well.
I think Debbie and I were just reminiscing on this building when it was being set up, and one of the big concerns for Barclays having come out here was that, executives were used to being able to entertain important clients in West End restaurants. I was really worried about not being able to replicate that in-house. So it was really quite an important part of getting this right. So I think it depends again on the industry you're in, but it certainly makes good sense. And one of the things very early on was doing also a fast menu because of people's time. So you can go in and have a 45-minute lunch, and then you're very sure you're being effective.
You've got some better spaces as well in some restaurants. I mean, you got the view is fantastic.
It's also having flexible spaces. I mean, Barclays is a good example where they've not only got private dining rooms, but they've got the restaurant as well. So you're replicating what's in the West End anyway. And as Julian says, I totally agree, the caterers have upped their game significantly. And the quality of some of the food in the private dining rooms is certainly commensurate to what's out there in the high street.
It's actually a delicate balance now, because we were accused of supplying Michelin-starred food in one of our dining the other day, and they just said, well, this is actually too good. Well, I'm happy with that comment, but...
Well, what about things like celebrity chefs? Because there's been a trend in recent years for not just contract caterers, but also buildings to get get a chef, a celebrity chef attached to them. Alice and I had a chat about this, and in a way that BaxterStorey bring in certain chefs to kind of train their staff. But I was thinking more of the likes of Gary Rhodes in Town 42 and things like that. Does that actually bring anything to an organisation, or is it just a bit of a fad?
I think it depends on the organisation, for a start. I don't think it's something that you use for sales to your clients or anything like that, but perhaps it helps the chefs that are in the kitchen to improve. When you're doing fine dining, for example, if you've got an executive chef there who is helping that team to develop the food and develop ideas, so that you bring something different to the table, other than having a chef that's come from a hotel who's always providing the same. It's very difficult to change things. We have our managing partner, for example, probably does fine dines 4 out of 5 days a week. So it's very difficult to then have a chef provide a different meal every time he walks into that room. So that's where I think they bring along the the extras, the little something a little bit different.
I think also from the point of view of the catering staff, it's quite if there is a named chef that's going to be working with them for a certain number of days, it's quite a morale boost for those people. I don't necessarily buy into the fact that it's a good thing for an organisation, but from a morale perspective for that team of chefs, I think yes, absolutely it is.
Yeah.
They can then say, oh, I worked with so and so last week, and that's their kind of claim to fame, if you like.
But not necessarily the customers in the building.
I think staff are more savvy than that. I mean, they know Marcus Waring isn't in the kitchen cooking or rounding. But I think I totally agree. If it can be used as a motivational tool, it's no different to any staff. They look to their mentors, for example, and if the catering team have actually spent time with someone that they admire, then that will reflect in the motivation they have when they go into the workplace. So I think used properly, it's a good tool, but sold as a badge.
It's about the use of it.
Yeah.
Because, for example, and I'll go back to here, and 6 years ago we had John Campbell, who still is a consultant with us and gives us a lot of time. But he gets very involved in training and developing chefs over a long-term, sustained period of time. And he was very instrumental in setting up the style and standards that we operate to here, which is replicated in a Michelin operation, which one. So I think it's a matter of if you just want a badge to put over your door and say, well, we happen to know these people, I think that's probably just front house marketing and isn't very meaningful. But if you're using it as a tool to improve the quality of what you deliver, and when a client says, well, how could I do something that is a little bit innovative and challenging, you've got somebody who can come and help them, who is clearly capable of doing that, because it isn't always possible to have these skill sets sitting in your company just waiting to do that very thing.
If I change it around completely, because we don't do fine dining, where we are, the ethos is everybody eats the same, whether you're the chief executive or the cleaner, we all eat exactly the same. For staff in the restaurant and hospitality, actually, sometimes it's a real treat to know that the catering team have been trained by somebody special, or we align it to programmes, so we're doing Jamie Oliver dishes. So don't underestimate, actually, yes, staff are savvy, but sometimes it's nice for them to know they've been treated too, so, and not to forget that element.
Where I've seen it work very well with the top chefs is at very senior level. And I've organised previously trying to get senior staff to use hospitality facilities more rather than going out, getting along a couple of celebrity chefs who've helped with the menu and doing an audience with. And that was oversubscribed by senior managers, and we did see the hospitality go up because they realised that there is Michelin star catering, and also the chefs there were trained, they spent a week in the kitchen.
So really the internal PR for the catering or the fine dining in your organisation.
But I also think it's quite, I mean, bear in mind, however we cut it in catering, really we are about the people that we employ and their motivation and their quality. And one of the things that was really amazing was, as John Campbell got more and more involved with our organisation, he has got very embedded into it, he said, actually, your chefs are far more tough job than my guys. I got 22 chefs doing 100 covers or whatever it is, and I know exactly what it's going to be. I might, and I can fit. You got guys doing 500 lunches, and there's 3 of them, and actually it's got to be fresh and it's got to be from the start every day. That is tougher. You can't miss deadlines. So I think it boosts the confidence of the chefs to really, and I think people are so interested in what they eat because it's important for social things, it's important for health, it's important. So it's a confidence thing as well.
I think as well, one of the things when we built our restaurant, which is 16, 17 years ago now, one of the things we said was we were going to have events in-house as well, so cocktail parties, programme launches. Rather than hiring somewhere externally, we do it in-house. When we first started 16 years ago, that was very difficult. We always wanted a specialist caterer to come in who could do ice sculptures, you name it. We have BaxterStorey as our caterer. The vast majority are now prepared and looked after in-house, because the standards of the chefs are so good. And that is a real testament to the progress that's been made, I think.
I think that's a big change in the whole contract catering industry, though, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
Going back to the 15, 20 years, it was never sort of tarred with a particularly great brush as far as, fantastic food, celebrity chefs, top restaurants, etc., etc. Whereas now things have moved on so far and so fast that a huge number of companies do contract out their food, their catering, and the quality is significantly better. Quite possibly because because subsidies are a lot lower now than they used to be. People aren't getting so much of the free food and things like that. People are paying not quite high street prices, but pretty close to high street prices in a lot of organisations. Therefore, the quality of food absolutely has to be good. Otherwise, people don't go outside. When they're getting their food, for next to nothing. Although they might complain about it if they don't like it, they're probably still going to eat that simply because they're not paying for it out of their own pockets.
So you're having to compete with
Because employees' palettes have changed anyway, and their requirements have changed.
Would have been educated, really. in a
I
way,
think so.
because,
In food, if you think 15, 16
For those of us
years
that
ago.
have been in industry quite as long, it's totally changed. I mean, people didn't, when I started, it was industrial catering, and it was industrial, and your game plan was to get 800 lunches to a workforce in 10 minutes, max.
Pie and chips,
They
baked
complained
beans.
bitterly if you didn't do it. So you didn't have a lot of time for finesse. You certainly weren't going to be making latte art and all that.
Yes, Kathy, you're right.
I think the point that Kathy made, jokingly earlier on was really important. It depends on the profile of your staff as well.
Yeah.
We have a young workforce. This is their meal of the day. Therefore, they use the restaurant.
Yeah.
If you've got an older workforce with a family, it's not necessarily that meal of the day. So.
But that's why it's important to actually understand the culture of the
Absolutely.
organisation and get the
Yeah.
offer right. And we keep bringing up space. It keeps coming back to
Yeah.
that. It's one of the single biggest elements we're seeing now, that this drive to reduce space but still maximise the offer and the variety is enormous.
Well, technology's been good there, hasn't it? Because, with induction cooking and
Yep.
Yeah,
turbo chef and stuff like that, you can do things in places you'd never even thought of.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
in our
Phil.
kitchen. It's
Yeah,
tiny, our
exactly.
kitchen, isn't it?
What have you got in there?
It's been tiny for 16 years.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I think that's a really important point. And whilst we've downsized over the years, the one thing we've never been allowed to touch is the restaurant. Every time the board have sort of debated, well, what are we going to do, what buildings we're going to lose, don't touch the restaurant, because it really is the focal point.
No, that's great that they recognise that.
But I think the consistent trend for us amongst most corporates is maintaining the offer but driving down the spatial demand. And that's challenging the operators in terms of how they approach that, because I think contract catering has for many years lived in a very privileged land where they weren't challenged on the back of house space. It was just assumed they needed these huge, great kitchens, and the consultants were guilty of planning them as well.
Yes, you were.
But
The older school, the consultant.
oh,